This is Mark Guerrero. Welcome to East L.A. Music Stories, episode 20. My guest is Danny Diaz, incredible guitar player who's played with everybody from Sal Chico, the Showmen, Ruly Garcia / Johnny Chingas, Chico, Ruben Guevara, Andy Tesso and the Rockers, and he's also a well-known and respected guitar teacher. How you doing, Danny?
Great, Mark. Great.
So, Danny, what got you interested in guitar and into music in the first place?
It all began when I had my godmother, Frances Pacho. She used to play an acoustic guitar and play these like Mexican rancheras, and she would play these C chord, seated with a moving bass line, and that just kind of got me into wow. I don't. It just struck me. I like the sound of that moving bass line with a chord going. I didn't know what it was. I was just a kid, But that's my first intake, and then from that I went to get myself a Mel Bay book and started playing Johnny Cash tunes, because then I had to play chords and have a moving bass line going. And I kind of fumbled my way through by listening to records of Johnny Cash and like that, and then everything else that I learned it from records.
How old were you when you started playing guitar, would you say?
I was probably about 13, 14 years old. Yeah.
So the first band you actually played with was Sal Chico, right? A real East L.A. pioneer.
Oh, yes, that's right. Right.
Talk about how you got in that band and how old you were.
Okay. I joined the Sal Chico group as a direct result of my own mentor, great songwriter, composer, Herth Martinez, formerly known as Sammy Philip Martinez. Right. And I got into, when I went to see him play with Sal Chico, I could see all the things that he could do on guitar that definitely it encouraged me to want to do the same thing. And so I did. And as time passed on, a few years, I don't know, months or years, I was asked, when Herth left Sal Chico, by that time I was pretty much on my way, so to speak, with being familiarized with different kinds of music. And so Herth asked me if I would like to play with Sal Chico, and he talked to Sal Chico. And of course, whatever Sal reference that he got from Herth, Sal respected Herth beyond, whatever you want to, because he was just such a great guy, such a dear friend, such a great player, that if Herth recommended me, he would definitely consider it. Although he had other people in mind that he would have considered besides me. But because of Herth referring me, that's how I came into being Sal Chico's guitar player.
Well, Herth, obviously, I knew Herth very well, and he was the late Herth Martinez. He passed away a few years ago, unfortunately.
Right.
But a great, phenomenal songwriter,
right.
A great guitar player. And we're going to talk a little bit more about him
right.
a little bit later. But yes, Herth Martinez was fantastic. So that's how you got in with Sal. And what kind of venues did you play with Sal?
Well, with Sal, we played weddings, banquets, bar mitzvahs, wedding anniversaries. Let's see, pretty much the round circle of what general groups that play casual music would play.
But did you play venues like, the Big Union, or places where there were dances, not weddings and parties, but did you do any kind of dances?
Oh, yes. We played St. Hilary's Church, St. Alfonso's, we played St. Nicholas Hall, and these were big venues for for large crowds of 200 to 300 people, and things of that nature.
How long do you think you played with Sal Chico?
Well, to begin with, I played with him after I had joined when I was 16. I stayed with him for about 2 years. Then I quit and was absent from him, and so I could go on my own and try to experiment different kinds of things that I wanted to do. And that would be when I rejoined Chico in 1978.
But that was a different Chico, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so after you played with Chico, the next band you got in was the Showmen with Orlando Zamora, who I just did an episode with a couple of episodes ago. And,
Yeah.
And this is all particularly interesting because this was really early. We're talking early 60s, before even the East Side sound bloomed and blossomed into what it became, around 64 and, on. But
Right.
so this was the early days. So you were with the Showmen.
Yeah.
And what were your experiences with the Showmen and Orlando Zamora?
It was a musical enjoyment because we didn't do it for the money. We did it because we liked playing together, and we liked what we were playing. And we were doing all the current music at that time. Whatever tune was popular during that period, we would play it, whether it would be Latin or rock or whatever. But we liked each other, so that's how.
Any particular memories you have of it, like particular gigs or shows or experiences you had with them, venues, anything like that?
Well, I can give you an experience that, unfortunately, I wasn't present when this happened, but it's an important event. I was ill at the time of this engagement, but their manager got him an engagement, believe it or not, at the Playboy Mansion. And they were playing the bottom level, and at the very top on the third level was a group that was just barely breaking, known as the Birds, and they were just coming out with their release of Tambourine Man. And when they told me that, oh God, I wish I could have been there at that engagement, but unfortunately I was sick. But yeah, they met a lot of important people at that. Yeah.
So that must have been that came out like around early 65. So Showman must have stayed together quite a while there, from 62, 65, something like in there, that area.
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow. So you missed that, probably the biggest one they did.
Yeah, I wish I hadn't, but yeah, I did.
So somewhere along the line, around that time, you started teaching guitar at
Right.
Johnny Thompson's.
Yes. Uh-huh. I was asked to. I was referred to by I don't remember who it was that referred me, but I got an interview with Johnny Thompson in Monterey Park, and he asked me questions about what I liked to play and what style I played, and I told him that I like playing all styles of music, and but preferably I was gearing myself towards jazz. But the teacher that I replaced, Kent Henry, was a phenomenal guitarist, had his own thing going, and so when I came in, I had a lot of big boots to fill because his students were, they were locked into him. And so when I came in, I had to build my own clientele, period.
So before we get into some of the students you had, let's get back to Hearth here a little bit.
Yeah.
Because before you became a teacher, you were learning from Hearth, but
Right.
not really in a formal way. Like you said, he was busy doing his stuff. Didn't have the patience. But you did learn from him by watching him and picking stuff up, right?
Right. I would go down to his house. First of all, I would call him, make sure that that I could come down there if he wasn't too busy, and he would invite me over, and I'd come in and sit down with him. And he was always either, if he wasn't writing or composing a tune, he was listening to something really cool. And he's the one that really inspired me to lean towards jazz, because everything I heard him play and listen to was so cool. It knocked me on my, on my butt. I just loved it so much, and he would be playing things by, like I listened to Miles Davis and John Coltrane and, Joe Pass and Barney Kessel and, just all kinds of great music,
So to give people an idea how great Hurth was, he was still like probably in his late teens, and he went on tour with Ray Charles as his guitarist for like a year.
Right. That's correct. Yes. He was a young kid when he was playing with Ray Charles. And nobody really knew that because, he was a very private person,
Yeah, and he was doing session work, and then in the mid 70s, he did 2 albums for Warner Brothers Records, produced by Robbie Robertson of the band,
right,
and Hurth from Earth and Big Bright Street, 2 great albums with phenomenal songs that he wrote.
Right.
And he was a hell of a songwriter. And during the time I knew him, like from around 96 or sometime in the 90s till he passed a few years ago. Every time I called him or we talked, he was writing a song. Like he would write virtually like every day. Didn't you say he had like gigantic books of tunes?
Yes, he had, from what I can recollect, he must have written, I would say he had 3 fake book size folders, or not folders, but thick like a phone book, 3 of them, all original compositions that he's written. And many of these compositions were used in different venues regarding movies and commercials. I think he even gave one of his songs to the Righteous Brothers or somebody like that. So, I mean, he was really that gifted. I mean, he was just
tremendous songwriter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as your teaching, now you're passing on your knowledge.
Yeah.
And you had students, but at least 3 of them became, really great guitar players who are recognized as some of the best guitar players to come out of East L.A.
Yeah.
And that's Bobby Robles, Joey Delgado,
yeah,
and Carlos de la Paz.
Right.
Talk about them.
Okay, well, Joey Delgado, I taught him when he was just when I would get together at Joey's house and we'd do these little jams, and Joey would be watching me, and he would ask me questions about how did you do that, and I would show him, and then he picked it up fast. One thing about Joey, he was a quick learner, and he did what I did. He started listening to records and copying things, and he would ask me, "Is this right?" And I would tell him, "Yeah, this is the right lick," and I would show him where that lick was, or like that. And he became familiarized with a fingerboard by his own playing, his own doodling, kind of, and listening to the same people that I encouraged him to listen to, and he listened to these people on his own, like the Allman Brothers, and a Mountain, and really great, just a array of different blues artists, all the Kings, B.B. King, Freddie, Albert Collins, and they picked up the soul. He picked up the soul where he got the vibrato of that thing down, and and he's a natural. That's what I.
And to this day, he's playing with his band, the Delgado Brothers.
Right.
And they've had several albums out. They've been together for many
right,
decades, just about. And they're still recording and playing concerts. And they even wrote a couple of songs that John Mayall recorded.
Exactly. Yes.
So what about Bobby Robles?
Yeah, Bobby Robles was an exceptionally gifted guitarist in that when he came to me, he already had all the qualifications of he had great dexterity, great tone on his guitar. he had all the makings of a great guitarist all around. Period. And so, whatever I taught Bobby, he would not only learn what I taught him, but he would take it a step further and listen to, get references from other albums, and just stay in his room and practice for hours. And every week when he would come back to me, he had something new. You know, he was a very aggressive player, and that took him, you know, to the heights that he is now reached. You know, and he's really gone, I mean, incredibly. I mean, he's played with Paul McCartney. He's played with let's see, Jackson Browne, Paul Simon. You know, and that's just a few of the people that I know of. He's also played with Alphonse Mouzon on a Latin jazz album. And like I said, he's done a lot of things that I can't even count all the stuff he's done, you know.
And he's been playing with the Midnighters for a good 20 years or so.
Exactly right. And another group called Flat Top Tommy and the Jump Cats, which is another really great blues jazz kind of a group. He's been with them a long time too. Yeah.
The Paul McCartney story was he was playing a annual benefit for Tom Hanks and his wife. They were doing this kind of a benefit, and they'd have big celebrity artists come in. And one year they had Paul McCartney, and Bobby was in the house band, and so he got to back McCartney. But you know, he had to be great for McCartney to play with him. Like, in other words, when they started rehearsing with him,
yeah,
they did the job. And Bobby, not only I think Bobby told me that Paul even kind of would keep going to him like as if he was the music director. But you know, they had a rehearsal with him, and they played that night and nailed it. And can't get much better than doing a night with Paul McCartney and have him like it.
Yeah, I agree with that, you know, and to this day, even now, Bobby's always out there with somebody that you and I maybe wouldn't realize that he's with right now. And you know, I'm happy for him, man, because you know he deserves it, you know.
The thing about him too is that he can play any style. You know, I've heard him do rockabilly, like Atkins. He can do jazz. He can do blues. He can do country,
right, slide.
Totally versatile.
Yeah. That's the greatness of Bobby. I mean, he could just and like I said, he had such a great style. His tone quality has always been good, and his picking techniques always. You know, Bobby's a natural when it comes to picking. I don't think he even like what I think about when I look at videos about pick slanting and picking this way and all that. None of us were ever taught that. Nobody even mentioned about which way to hold a pick. We just held it in our between our thumb and our index finger, and that was it. But now we're learning all these different kinds of angles and different terms for picking. And, you know, he did that naturally, and he didn't even realize, I guess maybe he did, that he was doing it, but he's been doing it forever, you know.
Very dedicated.
Yeah.
So what about Carlos de la Paz? I don't know much about him. In fact, I've never met him, and I don't think I've ever seen him play, but I've heard a lot of great things. What's his story?
Carlos de la Paz, again, there's another unique thing about Carlos. He used to be a drummer from what I first. So when he switched to playing guitar, he had a good sense of timing, and so when he would play, he had a real good feel for syncopated rhythms and funky things that normally people have to work at, but he did it naturally. So he, that was one thing that he did. But as far as his playing, how I met him, he came to Johnny Thompson's at the same period of time when Robles and Joey and all the other guys, and he like the other two, he liked playing a variety of different styles of music, and by that I mean he liked rock like Led Zeppelin, and he liked the Cream, and he liked the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, all that good music that everybody was enjoying. And then he went from that as we all moved towards blues. When we got involved listening to the Cream and Jimi Hendrix, we all motivated ourselves towards that direction, including myself. And my teaching moved into that direction too. So I met Carlos through the studio, and he was brought. He knows Joey real well, Joey Delgado, and so that's how I got in touch with him. That's how he became, And then he went on to do on his own right. He also did he got signed with Columbia Records. I don't remember the time, but he was with a group there that was. I wish I could remember the whole thing, but he was with that group, and then unfortunately, the group made some changes, and he was cut loose. But he was at that time he was with Columbia with that group, and then he went on his own and started branching out and playing, and then a few years after that, he became a teacher. Later, much later after I left.
So also in the 60s, you worked with Rudy Garcia, aka Johnny Chingas. And Johnny Chingas made some really good records, but some funny records. Now, tell me your experience playing with him.
Well, I met him through he worked on the side with Chico, and he was doing some things on his own, recording, and that's how he changed the name to Johnny Ching. Became known as Johnny Chingas. So he offered me, he wanted me to join him, but I wasn't particularly that interested in playing what he was playing. But I did some studio work with him under the table where he just paid me cash, and I played with him I did a 45 with him called Poquito Brown Soul, and I did one, which the one that really stands out was he recorded a song called Earthquake, and I had a really good solo on that. It was on a 45. I don't have the year down on that, but it was very popular. It was played on the radio and everything,
What about that song, Se Me Paró? Didn't you say you may have played on it?
Yeah.
Really?
I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know and those who don't speak Spanish, Se Me Paró means you gave me a hard on. And it's like a doo-wop. Se me paró, paró.
That's it.
Se me paró. Yeah, baby, we're in the backseat of my car and all this stuff, and hilarious, And a lot of his songs were really funny, and they had that old doo-wop thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned that you felt a little funny on some of them because a lot of them had that cholo vibe, and you weren't into that, and
Yeah,
kind of reluctant on that, but it was comedy,
Mm-hmm.
most of it.
He on one song, instead of saying the word fa la 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 la, he wanted me to say cha la 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 la. And I thought that was kind of corny, and I told him, no, I don't want to do that. But he paid me, so I had to do it. I didn't want to do it, but I did enjoy though doing the earthquake thing. I mean, that was really cool,
But you got to admit, Shalala is pretty funny.
Yeah.
Cha-la-la, cha-la-la,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Little Chicano humor there.
Yeah.
But okay. So what about the group Shaky Jake?
Okay. Shaky Jake came about in the around 60, early 60s, like 65, 66, 7 around. I was jamming at a place called the Ash Grove in Melrose.
Wow.
And I sat in there, and this guy came up, a blues harmonica player named Shaky Jake. And he came up and sat in with us. And the next thing he turns around and looks at me and says, I got a blues group. I need a guitar player. Would you like to play? And, I just said, sure. Why not? And I I met him. He took me to his house, which is on Curzon in Hollywood. And through Shaky, I got to play some really, really cool venues, and I met some really famous, what I would call famous people, musicians. We one occasion with the Shaky Jake band, we opened up at the Golden Bear for Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and
Wow.
that was
Was
fun.
Mike Bloomfield with him at the time?
No, it was a guitarist named Fast Finger Spud. That's what they called him, Fast Finger Spud. We also played the Experience on Sunset, and I think we opened up for Blues Image at that time, which was the guitarist was Mike Panera, great guitar player in his own right, and that was a really great experience. Getting to meet him and hear him play, and
Blues Image had the hit "Ride, Captain Ride," right?
yeah, that was Kent Henry, the second guitarist that joined the group later. Yeah, Kent Henry. Yeah, who also was a formal teacher at Johnny Thompson's before I became a teacher. Yeah.
Wow. I remember the Experience. It was on Sunset, and I saw Frank Zappa there, not with the Mothers, but when he was just doing his guitar playing, and then opening for him was what's that crazy band, Captain Beefheart.
Oh yes,
I
I
remember
remember them.
That
Yeah,
was far out, bizarre music.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was a major club at the time. But by the way, how did you get into the Ash Grove? That was a really cool folk club at the time, and blues club.
It was just my. I was with my brother-in-law. We were just kind of going around town checking out different venues, and he mentioned, "Oh, why don't we check out the Ash Grove? There's always blues things happening there." And so we did, and and that's how my buddy, my friend Bobby Fernandez, that's how he came into the picture, because Shaky Jake needed a bass player and he didn't have one. So I told him about Bobby, and next thing I know, Shaky approached Bobby and said, "Want to be our bass player?" And Bobby says, "Sure, why not?" And and we started playing all these venues, and we met. He introduced us to Canned Heat, the original Canned Heat.
Bobby's there with you, so he's there if you need some information. He can pipe.
Oh, sure, yeah.
How you doing, Bobby?
What's that?
You want us to come in and say hello?
Yeah.
But you're facing the camera.
Okay.
He wants you to say hi.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah.
How you doing?
Well, the thing about when Danny got me involved with Shaky Jake is we were both going to East L.A. college, and I got on the first bus stop, and I had a stack of blues albums, vinyl, and to this day, I don't know why I had them, but I had a stack, probably about a half a dozen or so, and so I got on the first bus stop. The second bus stop, this guy gets on, looks like a young Carlos Santana with the big fuzzy hair, and he sits across the aisle from me, and he looks at me, and I said, who's this guy looking at me? And he looks, he says, "Hey, are those blues albums?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can I look at them?" And he sat next to me, and it turns out we knew each other as kids.
Wow.
So we start talking, and then we go to my house. We get off the bus, go to my house. We walk into my house because we're going to listen to all these LPs. He walks in and see there's a bass hanging in the wall behind. I don't know if you can see that. That is a Gibson EB2 1964 bass. Danny sees that sitting in the corner, and he says, "Hey, do you play bass?" And I go, yeah. He goes, "Hey, I play with Shaky Jake. I'm going to go," and this is on a Friday night. He says, on a Friday afternoon, he says, "I'm going to go see him tonight. Would you like to come along?" So I did. And that's what started the whole thing when I met Shaky. And that's how I got involved with Danny again after years of, knowing each other as kids, then being separated, then coming back together again. But that's how we got together.
Well, that's what you call synchronicity. You know, that happened. I don't know if you know the story. Mick Jagger and Keith Richard, they knew each other as kids. They lost touch for years, and they saw each other on a bus. And Mick Jagger was holding some blues records, and they reconnected. Same story.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Good company.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool, man. Thank you.
Back to Danny.
Yeah.
Back to Danny.
Yeah. See what I mean? He's such a great, Bobby's got such a mind. Yeah.
The Ash Grove. I went there once, and I saw Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. Remember them?
Oh yeah. I sure do.
And, you know, Ry Cooder used to play there all the time, and it's a very hip venue.
Ry Cooder lives around the corner. Ry Cooder's my neighbor.
Yeah, he's Bobby's next door neighbor.
When? Now?
Yeah.
Now?
Ry Cooder. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you know, I worked on that Chavez Ravine album, the one that came out in 2003, and my dad was on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Small world. Yeah.
All the world is correct. So let's see what is next. So then you joined Chico. Now let me make the differentiation between Sal Chico and Chico. So Sal Chico had a band in the early 60s, very popular in East Los Angeles. And somewhere along the line, he decided to retire.
Right.
And Joe Espinoza told me the story, the bass player for Chico, who was the bass player for the Village Callers previously. And apparently, I mean, he may have played with Sal Chico first. I think he played with him. But when Sal Chico decided to retire, Joe sort of bought the franchise from him. He got all the music and everything, and maybe the equipment and whatever. And he took over, and the band became Chico. So Chico, led by Joe Espinoza, had a lot of members that had been in the Village Callers, you know, like Fuzzy.
Right.
You know, Manny Fernandez. I don't know if he was in the original.
Yeah, Manuel Fernandez. Yeah.
So you joined that band at some point. And,
right, in 1978.
And you played with them for like 20 years.
Yeah, till my last date with them at that time was 2012. And that's when I told you I was playing at the Miraculous Metal Church in Montebello, and it was the 2012. It was my last gig with Chico. I mean, I played with him again since then, but, you know, just on and off.
And so what were kind of the experiences? What would you have to say about your experience with Chico all those years? I mean, you played 1,000 gigs probably, but did you play when Bertha Oropesa was singing with them?
Oh, yes.
Great singer.
Oh, she's fabulous, yeah. During my years playing with Chico, we got to play a lot of like summer venues where we got to play throughout all the cities, and not only, you know, in Southern California, but all over, everywhere. And we did major concerts for all during the summertime, like 3 months straight, from one city to another city. It was exciting because we always had very, very energetic people that wanted to hear us. And we recorded, to this date, from when I was with him, 5 CDs of Chico, and I played on all 5 of them, you know, of the Chico. And we sold our CDs at the Alta fairs and all the reunions and things like that. And we were quite successful at it. And we were well known because of being Sal Chico, you know, the name Chico carried on, so to speak.
And they're still going strong today.
Right, they are. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, now let's talk about General Store of that band. And this, we're talking later 60s, right? Much later. Right. Talk about General Store.
I met, the General Store was basically a 3-piece rock group that primarily played Cream and Jimi Hendrix, things of that nature. And it was Martin Cole on bass, myself on guitar, and Andy Santos on drums. And we played a lot of really cool gigs. I mean, we played within the college circuit. We played for USC and UCLA. We played all their engagements. And then we also played for other important groups that we began to open up from through being booked by an agency, American Entertainment, run by Richie and Don Podler. And they booked us. We got to play with, we opened up for Moby Grape at one concert. Another concert in Cal State, we opened up for the Grateful Dead. Also at that same college, at another day, we opened for Iron Butterfly, Steppenwolf. Let's see. That's just a few. I know there's other ones, but these were important groups because they had their own hits going at that time, so.
Well, as you know, I had my own experiences with Don Podler.
Oh yeah, I do.
So
yeah.
Let me. This is pretty interesting. But anyway, So to set the stage, his brother Richie Podler, was an extremely successful producer who produced Steppenwolf's hits in the '60s.
Right.
Born to Be Wild. Those great songs, Pusher Man, and also Three Dog Night. So he was a major producer, and he owned a recording studio in Studio City called American Recorders, or whatever. And my band, which in the late '60s was called 1984, named after the George Orwell book, and we did our first single there for KAPP, KAPP MCA Records. We did a single at American Studios, but Don Podler had a little office there, and he was like, he was not the big timer his brother was. He was kind of, over there in the corner, like Quasimodo, and he was booking bands, but one of the things that he did, which was technically illegal, was he would book bands as other bands that were famous that people didn't know who the individual members were. So he'd take bands and he'd send them out as the Outsiders, Time Won't Let Me, Steam, Nana Hey Hey, Say Goodbye, whatever.
Yeah.
And I must admit, my bass player, Rick Rosas, who later went on to play with Joe Walsh and Neil Young, he had a line to Don Podler, and Don would get him gigs, and we'd go out. And we did a couple of those gigs. But the highlight for us was he had us booked as the Electric Indian. And I don't know who they were, maybe because we were Chicanos, like, hey, Electric Indian. We thought it was going to be a dance. We go out to Antelope Valley College thinking it's a dance. And this wasn't Richard Rosas. This was a pickup band with a couple other guys I knew. And Rudy Valona, famously the lead guitar player of the Blendells, had just gotten out of the Army. This is 1970. And he came in to play guitar with us, and he was rusty. He hadn't played in years, and he kind of lost his chops at the moment.
Yeah.
And the bass player and drummer, we were just a pickup band without a rehearsal. And we show up thinking we're going to play this dance as the Electric Indian. We show up and we're opening for Rick Nelson and the Stone Canyon Band. And their bass player was Randy Meisner, who had been in Poco, who was going to be in the Eagles shortly thereafter. Yeah. And I just remember playing and a sit-down audience, and we're unrehearsed, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I was mortified. But we did okay. And I just remember being mortified, and leaning against the wall was Rick Nelson and Randy Meisner checking us out. I'm going, oh my God, I wish I'd been here with a rehearsed band, But I did my best, and I remember I did a couple of Neil Young songs, Cinnamon Girl and Down by the River, which had just come out.
Wow. Yeah.
69, 70. And then I did Abbey Road had just come out, and I did Oh Darling. And I sang my best, played my best, and Randy Meisner actually gave me a compliment, but I was like so mortified. I go, oh, thanks, but I don't know. But it was quite an exciting experience. And but that was Don Podler. He was just booking bands in this kind of a way. And us as young musicians, to us, it was just a gig. We weren't thinking we're doing something illegal or unethical. It was just, oh, we got a gig. Okay. $50 a piece, whatever. But we got some good experience out of it.
Well, I can add something to that about booking being by Don Podler being booked as somebody that we weren't. He booked us once as a group Steam. And at that time, I didn't know who Steam, I never seen the album cover, so I didn't know who was in the band or what. And I told him I was reluctant to do that. I told him I don't want to do that. And he said, well, you have to do it. You know, if you don't do it, you don't get paid. So reluctantly, I did do it, but it backfired in my face because somebody knew the group from Steam and approached me
no.
and told me, you are a cheat and a fake.
Ooh.
And I thought, oh God, this is it. We're going to get screwed royally now. Because the guy was a friend of one of the guys in Steam. And he said, none of you guys are in this band. None of you. I know the whole band personally.
Oh.
And I said, too bad Don didn't know that, you know.
Exposed. We never got caught.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Let me add a footnote too that it's real important, because the band that I was playing with, which we were talking about, with General Store, which we were booked with by Don Ritchie and Don Podler, we got a chance to play with during a time when we got this. They put us in a rehearsal studio in Monterey Park to practice for some show we were going to be doing. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, what happened was they introduced us to a guy named oh God, I can't remember his name. But anyway, he's a guy that introduced us to Quilter, Pat Quilter. And we were the first group to use that gigantic Quilter amps before the way they are now. The Quilter amps that we had were as big as Marshall stacks. And when we played, we used that size amps, which they don't have those anymore. But it was Bob Lefevre was our manager. And he was good and tight with Felix Papalardi, who knew Cream and Mountain.
Well, he produced those bands, I believe.
He was trying to produce us.
Wow.
He wanted to record us. That's what we were practicing for.
You mentioned earlier, before we started recording, about you were one of the first guys to have a 12-string Rickenbacker. What band was that in that you had that?
Yeah, that was during the time when I was with a Carpetbaggers group.
Oh, okay. We didn't talk about that. I'm glad you reminded me. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's talk about that now.
Okay.
Carpetbaggers, one of the members was Edward James Olmos, who became the actor, and Orlando Zamora of the Showmen was also in that band. So tell me about the Carpetbaggers. We can talk about the guitar too. And that was 60s. That was mid 60s, mid to late 60s. Actually, I think you said 67, 68, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we had a group that we primarily played British rock. That's the thing that we enjoy doing. And by that, I mean, not only that would include, we did Beatle tunes, Animals, you name it, any of the British rock groups, Kinks, Zombies, all that stuff. And that also, at that same period of time, the folk rock period was very strong. And so I had spoken to Eddie, and Eddie is one of these kind of guys he was a go-getter. No, you ask him something, next thing you know, boom, he pops up with it. So he talked to a friend of his, Bob Wolf, and he says, you know what, my friend Danny, he needs a Rickenbacker. He said, but he don't have one. He says, and so next thing I know, about a week or two later, at a rehearsal, he comes walking in with this guitar, which I had no idea. And Eddie looks at me and he goes, hey, Danny, I got something for you. I said, what is it? And he says, open it up. I opened it up, and it was a cherry red sunburst Rickenbacker 12-string.
Sort of like McGuinn.
Just like the one McGuinn, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you played it in the Carpetbaggers.
Yeah. And I used it for playing all the bird tunes that we did, like 8 Miles High and Tambourine Man and Spaceman, any of the tunes that were out that the Byrds were famous for, we did them. As a matter of fact, that's how I got coined the name Zach Bird. They called me Zach Bird.
And there was the Turtles. They had a 12-string and
Yeah.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So those American groups were kind of copying the British invasion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a 12-string Rickenbacker, but I didn't. I made a mistake. In 65, I got one, but I made the big mistake of getting a solid body. And those were not hip.
Yeah.
I had it for years, and I eventually in the 90s, I traded it for a Strat, an American Standard Strat. But it had the sound, but it's not the same as, and they don't have the value. If I had a 65 like that, like a semi-hollow body, it'd be worth a fortune. The solid body wasn't very valuable.
That's true, yeah. Yeah.
So any other stories about the Carpetbaggers? What was Eddie Olmos like working with?
Well, Eddie was a lead front singer. That's what he wanted to do. And at that time, he was studying piano in school. He was taking piano lessons. And so he would boogie around, fool around with the piano and occasionally play some things with the group on piano. But most of the time he sang and banged away on the tambourine. And he was a showman like Mick Jagger. He would zip back and forth on the stage, and he would excite the people, and he would get their attention. He was an attention getter, right off the bat, Wow. Yeah. He was very dynamic.
And what kind of venues were you doing?
Well, we were playing. We got to play some gigs up in Hollywood, like some of these nightclubs, like Filthy McNasty's or Rainbow Room or something like that. There were a lot of different and then some smaller little clubs up in Hollywood because they liked the style that we played. We didn't play like everybody else was playing. Everybody else was playing rhythm and blues and more like James Brown stuff, and we weren't doing that. We were doing British rock and and that kind of thing. So that's what set us apart.
So you also played a bit with Ruben Guevara, who did a couple of albums.
Right.
He was involved with Frank Zappa, and he did an album. He had a group called Ruben and the Jets, and they did 2 albums. I know one of them was called Con Safos, and I think one was called For Real, something like that.
Yeah.
And that was sort of early to mid 70s, maybe probably early 70s.
Yeah.
And then he had a group called Con Safos. Is that who he played with?
Right. It was one of my biggest venues to date. It was in 1980. We got the privilege of playing at the Whiskey A Go Go, and the group consisted of myself on guitar, the great John DeLuna on drums, great bass player Hector Gonzalez on bass, and of course the phenomenal Ruben Guevara as our lead vocalist. And the horn section, Jerry Jomanville, great sax horn player, and Mike Stern. And both of those were studio players, but they played with us on that venue. And it was a fabulous show. The place was packed. You couldn't get in. There were people waiting outside to get in. It was so, and we were introduced by none other than Cheech from Cheech and Chong. He introduced us. And there is a video of that show. And I'm going to locate it and find it and send you a copy so you can have a copy of it.
That'd be cool.
It's a live copy of the entire show that we did.
Well, I know Ruben had worked with Cheech. He was involved in the movie Up in Smoke, and he was involved in some of their movies.
Right. I couldn't go to sleep after that. I stayed awake all night.
Did you do several gigs with him, or just how long did you play with him?
I only got that one major gig, and then the other stuff I did with him was just kind of at a place called La Grande in Hollywood, and that didn't turn out to be too good. It was just like a small underground club, and not too many people. I think. Oh, well, there is one thing I can share with you. Café de Grande, I played there, and the Sex Pistols.
Hmm.
The guy went towards I had just gotten in there. I walked in there, and this is when I was playing with Ruben, and nobody. It was just like I was like not even there. Nobody noticed me or nothing, And not that I wanted to be noticed. I walked in, but they looked at me like, who cares, like just another guy. But I was carrying my amp, and as soon as I set up my equipment, this guy comes up and tries to grab my guitar, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm Johnny from the Sex Pistols, and I want to play a guitar." And I told him, "No, you're not going to play my guitar. That's my guitar." I said, "You're not going to touch my guitar. I don't even know who you are." He says, "Well, I'm from the famous Sex Pistols band." I said, "I don't care if you're from my Aunt Emma's band. You're not playing my guitar." And he got all pissed off and huffy with me, but he didn't play my guitar, though. I kept him from doing it. But anyway, the good thing, and later on that night, I opened up with Johnny B. Good, and we brought the house down now, tore it up. And then they noticed, then when I walked out, I was getting all kinds of people saying, "Oh, would you like to play with this? Or would you like to do this with me?" And I was very flattered by it, but I just said, "Thanks, but no thanks." And I just walked out.
Well, I'm sure you and your band were better musicians than the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, yeah. They're still around, though, believe it or not.
Well, the one that what's the one that died?
I think maybe the leader.
One of them died
Yeah.
young. Sid and remember that movie, Sid and Nancy, Sid Vicious.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
So you did a lot of cruises. When did that happen?
Oh yeah. From 83 to 85, I got offered to play with a drummer named Gino Munder. He had a really good reputation as a vocalist and as a percussionist. And he had a quartet that he put together. And I was asked if I wanted to join and play with him. So I said yes. And I played with him on 2 ships. They were owned by Sitmar Cruises, the Italian firm that owned them. And I played on the Fair Wind and the Fair Sea. And we played the Mexican Riviera quite a bit. And we also played the Caribbean. And we played all over the Caribbean. And that was an enjoyable cruise. And I did that for like at least 2 years straight.
So
my last,
you got to get off on all the wonderful islands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the Caribbean and stuff.
St. Croix, St. Thomas, Montego Bay, you name it. I mean, I got to see all kinds of beautiful things that I would have never had a chance to see. And also I met some rather extraordinary people on the cruise ship. Like I met Congresswoman Bobby Fiedler, who I became friends with on the ship. And I was invited by I met some executive from Mobil Oil, and he invited me to stay with him on his ranch. And I couldn't do that because I'm under contract. So, for like 6 months to a year, I can't do anything. I'm committed to that ship, and I got to work on it, week after week after week after week, so on. But I mean, I met some extraordinary people on these cruises, and met a lot of fun places to see,
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what about Jumpin' Jack Benny?
Okay. Jumping Jack Benny, I met him through just like all my other, the word in mouth, and I'm trying to get a time frame for him. Let's see. It would have to be in the 80s, I would say, because I worked for him for I've been with him 6 seasons, playing in Huntington Beach at the Huntington Beach hotel, and we had a good. I played concerts with him every about 5 venues during the summertime, and I've done that for like 6 years. The past 6 years, I've worked with Jumpy Jack Benny.
Doesn't he? Does he play blues harp? A very bluesy kind of guy.
Oh yeah. He's a blues harmonica vocalist, tambourine player. I would coin him as the James Brown of blues harmonica players, because he moves around and does the splits. He throws two things up in the air, does the splits, does a spin, and catches both of them with both hands. And I very seldom ever see him miss a tambourine. He catches them. He could throw them way up in the air, and then he catches them. And when he performs, he's non-stoppable. I mean, I have to watch where I'm playing because he crosses right in front of me, sometimes he would do that. That's why he got the name Jumpy Jack Benny, because he doesn't stay in one spot. He'll be across. He's like Mick Jagger. He goes from one side of the stage to the other, back and forth. But he's a super grabber when it comes to the people. I mean, he's right there, and they know it. And, you know it when you're with him. And it's an exciting gig to play with him. I've always liked playing with Jumpy Jack Benny. And I still play with him even now, whenever he calls me,
I've seen a couple of videos of him, and he is really dynamic, quite a performer.
Yeah.
So now let's get to more the present time, or recently. You played for a while with Andy Tesso and the Rockers.
Right.
And Andy Tesso was lead guitar player for the Romancers for a time.
Mm-hmm.
And, he famously played lead guitar on their famous Do the Slauson album, which is a classic.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Do the Swim album. And he's very influential to the East Side sound. A lot of guitar players, including myself, kind of learned just from hearing his records. He was very, he kind of typified what the East L.A. sound was at the time, the Telecaster and the certain sound. And a lot of people, played like that, like Rudy Valona and Lawrence Perez of the Premiers, and me. I had a Fender Esquire. There was a certain sound, and Andy Tesso was very influential.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, great guitar player. And so now he formed this band, Andy Tesso and the Rockers. And how'd you get involved with him?
Well, I met him. It's kind of a funny thing. When I was doing my last gig at Chico at the Miraculous Metal, a gentleman by the name of Billy Cardenas came up to me and approached me, and I guess he liked the way I played, I've in all my years of playing, I find guys, hey, give me a call, and I would blow it off and say, they're not going to call me, they're just giving me a card, just, like anybody else. But I called him up, and lo and behold, when I met with Billy told me about this guitarist, and then it turns out that that's the same guy that I've always admired and respected, that I met Andy when I was with a Sportsman, and he was with the Romancers, but I never got a chance to hook up with him until Billy Cardenas introduced me to him. And then I said, "You're the great Andy Tesso." He goes, "Yeah, you're the Danny Diaz." I said, "Yeah." And so we hooked up, and I love the guy, man. I mean, I respect him. He's like a brother to me. We're like this. We're like glue,
I'm going to interview him soon. I talked to him the other day.
Yeah.
So he'll be an episode pretty soon. He also played with the Mixtures in the 60s.
Yeah, that's right.
And Billy Cardenas, for those who don't know, was the manager of the Premiers and the Blendells and the Sisters and the Escorts, my band, and the Rhythm Playboys and Ronnie and the Casuals. I mean, he managed so many great East LA bands.
Yeah.
And, Andy Tesso was his guy. I mean, Andy and Billy were very close, and they stuck together for a long, long time. So that's how you met Andy. Okay. So you made this CD, and it's an EP. It's got 6 songs on it, and here it is.
Mhm.
And it's Andy Tesso and the Rockers, Rockin' Like There's No Tomorrow. So the album is titled after one of my songs, Rockin' Like
Yeah.
There's No Tomorrow.
Mhm.
So you guys, I was pleased that you guys recorded 3 of my songs, Baby, I Love You So, Rockin' Like There's No Tomorrow, and Meet Me on the Other Side. And you sang 2 of my songs. You sang Rockin' Like There's No Tomorrow and Meet Me on the Other Side. So
Mhm.
tell me about that experience.
Well, first of all, it was an honor to do your material, and I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to do it. But secondly, I was happy that you were pleased with the way our interpretation of what you did, because I didn't want to take away from anything that you did. I wanted to add our own touch to it, but with the same intensity that you gave it to us with. And I think we captured that idea when you heard the final track of the CD, because I remember you had mentioned you were quite pleased with the way it came out, and I was happy with the way it came out, and I was especially happy when you said that you liked the way it turned out. That made me extra, you know.
Yeah, I like what you guys did. And the one you transformed the most was Baby, I Love You So.
Mhm.
Because when I wrote it as a doo-wop song, you know, baby, I love you so, don't ever let me go. And you guys bluesed it up, changed a few
Yeah.
chords, and it turned into a bluesy thing. And I really dug a lot what you guys did with that one.
Yeah,
And,
thank you. Yeah.
And then the other 2, you guys really Rockin' Like There's No Tomorrow, Meet Me on the Other Side, and you did really nice vocals. And I
Yeah.
wanted playing piano on those songs too.
Right. You did a great job as always, too.
Thank you. And that was a kick. And then you also recorded a couple of Max Ubaez's song, who was the leader and founder of the Romancers,
Right.
Sneaking in the Back
Right.
Door, Sneaking in the Back Door, and
Right.
what was it? Got a Feeling, right? It was a kind of a real Latin song.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
And you did a Chan Romero song, Chan Romero, who did the Hippie Hippie Shake,
Right.
recorded it back in '59, and the Beatles actually started playing that song in concert and recorded it on their BBC
Yeah.
sessions.
Mhm.
And so you did Chan's song, a couple of Max's, and 3 of mine, and it's a really good CD, Rockin' Like There's No Tomorrow.
Yeah. We were proud of that. Yeah.
Very cool, and yeah. So what else? Did we miss anything? Is there anything else?
Well, the thing that came after that would be my own
Oh, that's right.
personal my CD,
Right.
which I composed all the tunes except 2 of them. Johnny Be Good, which I can't take credit for, that was the great Chuck Berry wrote that, but I have a rendition, our own rendition of that song. And the one that Delgado Brothers gave us permission to record, and I didn't write that one, but all the other tunes, I wrote all of them. And I was fortunate enough to get some of the best musicians in the business. And when Joanne Ledesma, who's my producer, she got them to, all she said was, Danny's recording a CD, would you like to be involved in it? And they all said yes. And the only ones that said no would be the ones that, because they were busy, they were either on the road or they were recording that time. They didn't have the time to do it. But I got quite a few people on that CD. I got like over 30 people that, you know, and each of those people that I have are all great players in their own right, you know, including all the guitar players that are on there, which is, you know, like George Dez is on there, and Robles is on there, and Joey Delgado is on there, and Ronnie Reyes, who's another phenomenal guitarist in his own right. And then on the percussion, I got Johnny Batos, and I've got
From Oingo Boingo.
Yeah, Oingo Boingo, and I got Johnny Johnny Avila, who was also an Oingo Boingo, and he played guitar, the cigar box in that, and I got Steve Campos on keyboards. I got the great Joey Guerra, who also played with Tierra.
Right.
and Soto and so many other groups, and he's been all over the world. So like I said, I've been blessed with the greatest. For them to do my CD for me was I can't say how much I'm grateful I am to them doing it. I can't believe they, but they were willing to do it and they did it.
Is the CD available?
It's called, yes, it is. It's called Lessons in Music, and you can find it under Joanne Ledesma. She's the producer, and she's the one that has all the info on it. And the CD has all the a lot of the people that I taught are in that. There's like a biography of all the different, and it's included in this CD.
I haven't heard that yet, so I'd like to get a
Yeah.
copy somehow.
Yeah, so definitely, yeah. So yeah, that's and I'm working on I'm doing that, and I'm working on a continuation of another one with Andy Tesso and the Rockers, and that's what I'm trying to finish. But we've had some delays for different reasons, but we're still going to finish it though, do another CD.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing the interview, man. Great job.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate everything you've done for us, for all the musicians, and it's a pleasure to speak with you. Really.
My pleasure too, man. Well, have a good one, man. I'll see you soon.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Take care.
You too.